President Trump and French President Emmanuel Macron are holding talks at the White House. The two met following the news that the UN adopted a resolution from Ukraine and several European allies demanding Russia immediately withdraw its troops from inside the Ukrainian border and rejected one from the U.S. urging an end to the war without mentioning Moscow's aggression. CBS News White House reporter Willie Inman is following this for us. Willie, what are we expecting to come from today's talks between President Trump and his French counterpart?
Hey there, Lindsay. Good to be with you this afternoon. Well, an Oval Office meeting between the president of France and President Trump just wrapped up, and the leaders are set to take questions at a press conference in the next several minutes. We'll be, of course, bringing that to you once we see it. The pool hasn't gone in to that room yet. But I want to point out that the French president and President Trump hosted G7 leaders. This was a meeting that happened earlier in the day, and the president gave a readout of that meeting on Truth Social. He talked about the rare earths deal that is he's set to negotiate with President Zelensky of Ukraine. And during that Oval Office meeting, he mentioned that Zelensky could perhaps come to the United States to sign that deal this week or next week. It's unclear when that'll happen, but the message that the U.S. is trying to send is they're trying to recoup some of the money. That's what White House officials are saying. Some of the billions that the United States has spent in supporting Ukraine with that military assistance, economic assistance as well. And this is one of the ways that you do it, have this economic partnership. On top of that, during this Oval Office meeting, that really was a mini press conference, so to speak, because the president took many questions from those in the room. The president mentioned how he could potentially be open to visiting Moscow once this is all over. He didn't necessarily commit to a certain timetable, but the focus here is getting the war in Ukraine, getting that problem solved. The president said he was open to peacekeeping troops, European peacekeeping troops being stationed in Ukraine, saying essentially that it wouldn't be a problem. So a lot to talk about here, a lot on the table for these two leaders as they work on both sides of the ocean to try to get some type of deal done as the U.S. talks with Russia. And I'll also note that the president said he would be meeting with President Putin as well. We know the U.S. officials have been working on setting the groundwork for that meeting to take place, Lindsay.
What other news came out of the Oval Office? And also, how would you characterize the relationship between the two leaders right now?
Yeah, that was interesting to watch. Of course, these two men have known each other for several years now. During President Trump's first term in office, they had a really just kind of like brotherly type of a feel there. They actually leaned over and touched each other at one moment. President Trump was talking about a story he was given where he was listening to the president of France speak French at one point when he was visiting France. And really, you could just see that these two leaders, they know each other well. They're very familiar with each other. Of course, there are some concerns amongst the Europeans that the Americans have moved too close to the Russians, to their side of things. The concerns that not only will the Europeans be left out, but the Ukrainians be left out of that deal with the Russians as well. So that's why you see President Macron here, the first European leader to meet with President Trump in Washington, D.C. We're going to see Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister. He's visiting later this week. And all eyes are focused on this deal to come to some type of agreement to end this war in Ukraine. And President Trump and other U.S. officials have been really adamant about the Europeans playing a more pivotal role in that security assistance with Ukraine. Most notably, I'll mention that during this Q&A session that happened in the Oval Office, President Trump was asked about security guarantees, essentially said that wouldn't be a problem, but kind of the White House has been leaning into this thought that the Europeans will play a more key role, including the president mentioning there that those European peacekeeping troops could be on the table in terms of those agreements that are being worked out with Russia and Ukraine, Lindsay.
Willie Inman, thank you.